I have attended a great many school concerts in my time. 41 years as a secondary school teacher will do that to a man. You develop a feel for the rhythms of these afternoons, the nervous shuffling of programs, the slightly too loud applause after each child finishes. I retired 7 years ago, and I had thought those days behind me. But my daughter asked me to come to young Oliver's spring music day at Halverston Academy, and I could hardly say no. So there I was in the back row of the school hall on a Thursday afternoon in April with a folded program in my lap. The hall was handsome enough. Tall windows along the east wall, pale afternoon, light falling across the rows of chairs, a black grand piano on the low stage at the front. Maestro Aldrich Vane stood to the left of it, straight-backed, impeccably dressed, a man who wore his authority like an expensive coat, with great care and a faint expectation that you would notice. He had a precise gray beard and the kind of stillness that announces itself. The program was orderly. The children came up one by one, a Mozart minuet, a simplified Bach invention, a Clementi sonata rendered with more enthusiasm than accuracy, and the parents applauded warmly. Oliver played respectably. I clapped for him with genuine pride. Then, somewhere in the middle of the second half, I noticed the girl. She was sitting in the far left of the third row, slightly apart from the cluster of children around her. Small for her age, I thought, perhaps 11 or 12. She wore a plain gray cardigan over a white blouse, her dark hair pulled back simply. There was nothing in her posture that announced anything. She held her program in both hands and looked straight ahead, and I would not have given her a second glance, that even from the back of the hall, I could see that she was still in a way that was different from the other children's stillness. They were fidgeting beneath their composure. She was simply quiet. Maestro Vene called her name near the end of the afternoon. Nadia Perrin. Something shifted in the hall when he said it. A small thing, barely perceptible, but I felt it. It was in the way a few of the parents exchanged a glance, in the way one or two of the other children near the girl seemed to look away, in the faint trace of something at the corner of Vane's mouth that was not quite a smile. Nadia, he said again, addressing the assembled parents as much as the girl, is perhaps not one of our formally trained students. She has not been in the program long. He paused in precisely the way a man pauses when he is enjoying the pause. But she asked to play today, and I thought, why not let her? Music's for everyone. There was a soft murmur, polite, indulgent, the kind of murmur a room makes when it has already decided what it is about to. Here. The girl rose without hurry, set her program on her chair, and walked to the piano. She did not look at Vane. She did not look at the audience. She pulled out the bench, adjusted it a fraction, carefully, as though she had done this before in a place only she could see, and sat down. Her feet found the pedals. Her hands rested for a moment in her lap. I found that I had stopped looking at my program. The first note arrived like something remembered rather than begun. It was the opening of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the first movement, that steady rolling tread of triplets beneath a long singing melody. I have heard it played by professionals, by students of every level, and I can tell you that the first thing it demands is patience. It cannot be hurried or forced, and this child, this plainly dressed, quietly still child, whom the maestro had offered to the hall as a gentle lesson in expectation, played it with a patience that had no business being in a 12-year-old's hands. The hall had been settling, the way halls do, with small coughs and the whisper of shifting weight. Within 8 bars, it was not settling, it was holding itself. She played as though she were listening to the piece at the same time as she was producing it, as though the music were arriving to her from somewhere else and she was only following faithfully, note by note, phrase by careful phrase. The tone was even, the rubato natural, and in the swell of the melody's descent, there was a quality I can only describe as grief that has been turned into something useful, a grief with good posture. I watched Maestro Vane. He had been standing with his hands clasped behind his back, wearing the expression of a man prepared to intervene tactfully. By the end of the first page, his hands had come apart. By the end of the second, he had taken a single step back, as though the air immediately around him had changed. His face, which had been composed, was no longer composed in the same way. It was open. It was, I thought, briefly unguarded, the face of a man who has made an assessment and is quietly reckoning with its cost. Then the sonata shifted. It did not end so much as exhale, the final bars fading with a gentleness that left the room exactly as suspended as a breath held at the top of a rise. And then, from that suspension, from that place where silence and sound are nearly the same thing, Nadia began to play something else. It was not a piece I recognized. It was simple, the simplicity of a thing reduced to its truest form, not simplified for lack of skill. A single melodic line, slow and wandering, with a harmonic accompaniment moving beneath it like a deep current. It had the quality of a lullaby, not a published, composed thing, but the kind of melody that belongs to one room, one voice, one particular time of night. The kind a mother hums when she thinks no one is listening. I cannot tell you how I knew that, but somewhere in the middle of that small, searching melody, something in the hall that had been held gave way. It was the woman 2 rows ahead of me who went first. I saw her shoulders change, the particular surrender of someone trying not to weep who has lost the argument with themselves. Then the man beside her, who had been sitting with arms folded in the alert way of a man who came for his son's peace and stayed out of courtesy, he unfolded his arms and his hands came together in his lap, and he bowed his head. By the time Nadia played the final phrase, unhurried, certain, letting the last note carry as long as the hall would hold it, I do not think there was a dry face in the room. I say this carefully. I am not easily moved, or so I had believed. But I found that my throat was closed, and that the program I had been holding was folded into a tight rectangle in my hands, and that I could not have spoken if called upon. The silence after the last note was not the silence of an audience waiting to applaud. It was the silence of people who need a moment before they can return to themselves. Maestro Vani was the one who broke it. He did not begin the applause. He did something else, something I have been turning over ever since. He crossed the 2 steps to where the girl sat, still on the bench, her hands now in her lap, and he said something quietly to her, something the hall did not hear. Then he straightened, and his face, which a professional habit of composure had been failing to control for the last 4 minutes, was wet at both cheeks. The applause that came then was the kind I have not heard at a school concert before or since. It came from everywhere at once, and it came to its feet. I stood with the rest. Nadia rose from the bench, folded her hands once in front of her, and gave a small, serious curtsy, the curtsy of a child who had practiced it not for show but out of respect, for the music if not for the audience. Then she looked up, and in that looking up there was something I recognized, though I am not sure I have the right to name it. It was the look of a person who has just done the thing they were keeping themselves for. I learned later, through my daughter, what the other parents already knew, that Nadia's mother had died in November, that she had spent the last months of her life teaching her daughter the Moonlight Sonata in the front room of their house, on an old upright piano, with whatever hours she had left, that the second piece, the lullaby, was the one the mother had composed herself, years before, and had never written down, that Nadia had promised her she would play it somewhere people could hear. I have thought about that afternoon often in the years since. I think about the maestro's unguarded face, and what it cost him to let it be seen. I think about the woman 2 rows ahead and the way her shoulders changed. I think about that melody, the one that belonged to a single room and a single voice, filling the Halverston School Hall on a Thursday in April, offered to strangers by a child in a gray cardigan who had made a promise and kept it. A man could attend 1,000 concerts and never hear anything like that again. I am glad I was in the back row.